Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is, wherever you are right now. Thank you for tuning in to the Conversations with Dr. Don show. The show is produced and broadcast from the Portland, Oregon area. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people, like most of you out there, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about what we've decided to talk about tonight. And tonight we'll be talking about the New World Order Revisited. And I say revisited because about a month ago, Jimmie was on and we talked about the New World Order, but we were so interested in his life and his history and his personal history, we didn't get to the main subject. So we're going to get to the main subject tonight, and we're going to spend just a little time talking about who you are and who I am, and then we're going to get to the whole meat of the show. And I apologize for making you guys come back on, but I'm sure you found Jimmie's personal life more interesting.
As you say, everybody's life is interesting. So in your introduction, you said, as most of you are interesting people. I totally agree. Most people are interesting. Most, I would say all of them, once you dig a little bit. So,
and some people are more interesting than
well, let's not go into the direction.
Yeah. How are you feeling right now?
Oh, fine. Thank you. I hope the crew is fine. You are fine. Good. Yeah. So far.
You stay pretty even-keeled, don't you?
Even-keeled?
Could you because
please
you
qualify?
Say, when I ask you, over the years I ask you, how are you tonight? And you say, oh, fine. And then you go on talking about how fine you are.
I didn't realize it, but there are many things I do not realize, and that may be one of the many.
That's why you're so charming. This is never mind. So we're going to be talking about the New World Order Revisited, and we're going to go into a brief description in part one, the bio segment, to talk about who you are. Now, let's just go with you volunteering from the top of your head who you are. Some of the questions I usually ask you, so I won't bother asking you those specific questions unless you want me to.
No, not particularly. My biography, like anybody's biography, can be shrunk. I am officially a retired engineer. I have, as I mentioned before, and for the benefit of those, or for the malefit of those who have not heard it before, I've had 3 lives. The one at the beginning as a country singer, and then
Country singer,
and then I, which I did on and off for 10 years while I was studying, and then I got a degree and was hired by Tektronix, and they got me here, and I worked for them for a while. I became what I had a rather Napoleonic title, but I'm not going to repeat it because I do not like Napoleonic titles. And after that, I became a little bit disenchanted with corporate life, which is not a unique experience. And I decided to found my own company, which in a moment of madness, but the company resisted and did pretty well for over 20 years. After that, I said, enough is enough.
Mm.
And
the corporate life, huh?
The corporate life was enough. There was life me every day, because every day I had to, when you run your own company, you have it's a task which you cannot take too lightly. Then I decided to do something else. Became sounds very pompous to say I became a writer, but I've written quite a bit now, and so I'm still doing that now, along with various other activities that enable me to occupy the day as much as I can.
What's your main tome on Shakespeare?
Shakespeare and Dante. Shakespeare, so dictionary. 2 published dictionary, 1 third dictionary I'm working, but I will never finish it, but I will work on it every day. The Shakespeare dictionary is for those who have read it, who don't know about it, but now I have quite a good number of readership people who bought the book. It's a very thick book, as you remember. It's called An Arsenal, Your Daily Shakespeare, which is also the name of my website. your daily Shakespeare, an arsenal of verbal weapons to drive your friends into action and your enemies into despair. And out of that,
I've been there.
Out of that, yes. And out of that, the government of Tuscany then charged me, or rather proposed
Tuscany
in Italy, to do the same type of dictionary for Dante's Divine Comedy, because I studied in Italy, so I studied at Classical Museum, Lyceum is called.
Yes, yes.
And so I did that, and I also wrote a history of Europe, a counter history of the United States in Italian. And
In Italian.
yes, for the Italian readers.
You're multilingual, aren't you?
Yes, do not ask me again how many languages I speak, because no, I'm just kidding.
Yes,
and,
of course.
But the current part of the articles on my website, there are over 500 full-length articles on various subjects, particularly concerned with everyday's life.
Over 500.
560, whatever they are now. And then one of my current project is, I call it because you're familiar with the with the mythological figure of Penelope, who was the wife of Ulysses in the Odyssey. Ulysses was one of the heroes of the Greek army, the ones who brought freedom and democracy to Troy. And then he went on the way back to his island of Ithaca. And when he arrived there, he found that there were some, I would say, terrorists who had taken over his kingdom. And they were trying to convince Penelope that Ulysses was dead, but she did refuse to believe them. And so what she did, said, "Okay, I will marry whoever wants you once I finish to knit this particular
Greek
garment."
mythology.
Greek mythology. And so, but what she did, she knit during the day, and during the night she undid all she knitted before to start the day. So that's the myth. So that is the I do not undo what I did during the day, but it's such an enormous task. I call it the Dictionary of Things Well Said. And I have now about 19,000 entries. And for each entry, you have a way of classifying. And so, for example, if I want to say, I don't know, war, you would have the system will bring up all the good things said, or things well said about war. War is not a good thing. Or if you're peace, all the good things said about peace, and so on and so on. So,
and ad infinitum.
Ad infinitum, because there's an infinite number of books. But it's interesting for me because every now and then I find, this is exactly the best way of conveying a concept in ways that would enable people to get some enjoyment out of it. So that's it. It's the end of story.
I keep asking you the same question over and over again. Do you ever sleep?
It sounds very pompous to say yes, but the reason for there are various you can employ. Every mode of employing life is good, depending on the choices of the person. But for me, if I am not active, or active in a very modest sense, active doing something that keeps me occupied significantly, I tend to fall into a kind of depression. And so it's an antidepressant. It's a medicine without secondary effects.
Non-pharmaceutical.
Non-pharmaceutical.
Antidepressant.
Remedy.
Thank you. Well, wonderful. Yeah. So that's your history so far, huh? And we managed to use up 10 minutes of our time. We won't allow enough time to take care of the New World Order.
Yes.
All right. Shall we take a break right now? So we're restarting the show, even though it's kind of early. Thanks for staying tuned. And for your viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about what we've decided to talk about tonight. Tonight we're talking about the New World Order, and my guest this evening is Jimmie Molia.
Thank you.
And he was on about a month ago, and we're going to pick up where we left off the last time. And we're talking about the New World Order, and we're visiting it. And what is the New World Order, Jimmie?
It's an identification, and as such is a label. However, the label is founded on some verifiable facts. So perhaps if that is the question, we can start from some verifiable facts. Even the verifiable facts are arbitrary, but one that is commonly agreed upon is the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, which is somewhat a watershed event for various reasons. And we could, it is part, I'm not the only one to say it, but it could be considered as the spring or the official beginning of the New World Order. And this answer the question. I answer the question. But if you ask me, what is the New World Order? Okay. Well, the New World Order is everything that is happening now. So, in order to make sense out of the events, out of the flow of events, out of causes and effects, we may start for the Berlin Wall, as I was saying. And it has been celebrated even recently because in the last year, at the end of last year, it was the commemoration of the end of the Berlin Wall, where the Secretary of State of the United States went to Berlin to celebrate the triumph of freedom and democracy. But in reality, the fall of the Berlin Wall was really the fall of both the system in the East, but also the system in the West. And of course, what is celebrated is the fall of the system in the East. What is not celebrated or not acknowledged is the dramatic change that the fall of the Berlin Wall also caused in the West.
Yeah, how does that connect to the New World Order, which
Yes,
you just said?
Because that was the, at least, identifiable beginning of a new type of handling international affairs, of the descriptions of what or the changes in the state of the individual states, in the conditions that eventually led pretty quickly to what is called the European Union, and everything, and the cultural, also the cultural changes that took place could be assigned, could have their origin assigned to the fall of the Berlin Wall.
So that was the beginnings of the New World Order?
Yes. Now we can talk a little bit, we can talk if you wish, about what happened in Germany as being evidence or rather, being significant for the New World Order, for the establishment of the New World Order.
Who's in charge of the New World Order?
That is a question that cannot be answered easily, because what happens has many reasons, and so everything that happens could be, if you want to analyze it, could have thousands, if not millions of reasons. Everybody has his own opinion. I believe that it was a general plan behind it. Who was behind the plan precisely about this and about that is debatable, but generally it was something that was planned. It was planned in the background, so to speak.
Wikipedia talks about the New World Order in terms of a conspiracy theory.
Conspiracy theory is a good term to apply to anything that you don't want to believe with. So let's not go into it, because if any of unofficial explanation, any explanation that does conflict with the official explanation is a conspiracy theory. So it's a way of discarding somebody else's opinion. It's a very euphemistic way to say you are mad. But
circular.
It never ends. But nevertheless, let's assume that what happens was something that the gods wanted. When the Berlin Wall fell for a number of reasons, but the main one is that from what I know Germany pretty well, because I've been working there as part of my corporate
You've
life.
been in so many places.
Yes, I have, but it's not because I am particularly gifted at going, because of my job required to be in different places. So I've seen both East and West when East Germany was still East Germany, and of course West Germany too. So the idea was that the East Germans were not free, were living under a very dictatorial regime, could not buy as much as the Western could buy, and so forth. So the power of propaganda, and also how much money was spent in making this propaganda possible. I'm opening the bracket here. You are familiar. We all are familiar with the coup in Ukraine, which happened 6 years ago, whatever.
Quite recent.
It's quite recent, and even there was some anecdotal but real evidence that we go back to the Berlin, but evidence that was a united U.S. coup. Remember Victoria Nuland, who was the secretary, whatever she was, assigned to the coup in Ukraine, when she became famous because they intercepted a phrase about somebody was asking, or rather, the American ambassador was asking, what will the European think about the nomination that we have made for the new government? And she said a phrase which I cannot repeat online, but has become pretty famous, of what she said about indicating how much she cared about the Europeans. But I brought up Ukraine because she herself said, I remember almost verbatim the sentence, we have invested more than $5 billion to make these changes and other changes, meaning democracy in Ukraine, which now it is anything but a democracy. It is. So going back to, in the same sense, whatever was prepared, what happened in Eastern Europe, and to a certain extent in Moscow, was partly, I would say, 60% due to 70% due to the nature of the regime, which was attempting to become westernized but didn't really make it. So they had to
westernized mean crony capitalism as practiced in the U.S.?
Because the Russian culture is so different from ours, I don't know whether it would have become a crony capitalism, but certainly there was a perception that things should have been different. I still remember.
Sure. Particularly
because of the censorship, but the censorship was imposed, was a tool, a debatable tool to prevent heretical inroads, which they did not succeed in preventing anyway. So, but what happens anyway? Going back to trying to tie this up with the New World Order.
Yes.
When and these are actual facts, as not. When the wall fell, and in the next few days, the next day or in the same week, they declared that the East German mark had the same value of the West German mark. And before, there was a lot of exchange between East and West Germany, Communist East Germany and Western Germany. There was it was the major client with a major exchange. So that had the effect of making the goods in Eastern Europe 3 times more expensive.
Some quick changes in value.
In value, of course. At the beginning, because we are all welcome positive changes in our economic conditions.
There's a competition between the East and the West, the Russian versus the West versus the West.
Let me finish the part of the economics.
Excuse me.
No, that's okay. It's a good point, but I want to finish this one. So first, immediately they say, okay, the East German citizen was told that it is true that his East German mark would have the same value of the West German mark, which means a tripling of the salary. It's 3 times. All of a sudden, it's like having $1,000 and have 3,000 overnight. What he was not told was that also the goods that East Germany was producing would become 3 times more expensive, which means that they couldn't sell them anymore because they were more expensive. So overnight, yes, there was the unification, but all of a sudden, most of 5,000, how many thousand firms, they essentially had to close down within a matter of weeks. So then came the privatization. There was an office in West Germany, or in Germany now, unified Germany, of privatizations. And so some of these factories were sold maybe for $1 or $2, something, given away to the usual shark that are always there.
The same thing that went on in Russia when it collapsed.
The same thing with Russia when it collapsed.
Soviet Union.
And we could go in. So, and of course, even the exports of East Germany collapsed. And after 15 years, although Germany is a prosperous nation, the combined exports of Germany, East and West now, united, is less than what the combined export of Germany and East Germany separated was before the fall of the Berlin Wall. These are to the point that now, and also as a result of this, the East Germany remained, even today, much poorer. And of course, they also have lost all the benefits that they had, which they took it for granted, but they were benefited. This is not an apology for the communist regime, but it's important, I think, in evaluating history to see things as they are. So, and in fact, there is quite a bit of disappointment, at least reading from a newspaper. I was in Germany last June, but I cannot say I didn't have the time to interview here or there, but I was able to see some of the old German, East German sector and some of the places where my son told me the other people who really prefer East Germany.
Nothing like being there.
So how does this connect to the New World Order?
Yes.
It's because with the fall of Berlin Wall, and of course after the fall of the Soviet Union, with all the misery that the fall of the Soviet Union brought to the Russian citizen for 10 years. There have been a dramatic fall in population. Many of the rights that they have, even today, there is no free health service in Russia. So,
is that a Russian version of crony capitalism?
At the beginning, yes. In fact, the same thing that happened in Germany, meaning the selling of the companies for nothing. Sometimes viable companies sold for $2 or $3. Can you just? And yes. I know one company in Germany where the guy did this. They succeeded in Germany. It's fine, but the same thing happened in Germany, in Russia, perhaps even more dramatically, because all the huge companies were bought for nothing, and so they created a number of oligarchs in Russia. Even now, some of them became famous.
Crony capitalism. I'm not going to repeat that again.
It's a crony capitalism. I would say it's a sharkish capitalism. But so this was one aspect, going back to the theme of our conversation, this was one aspect of the changes that could allow us to define what happened as a New World Order. But the New World Order, as we mentioned even last time, if I remember correctly, is also tied up to another event that occurred 20 years before, which is the 1968 so-called Student Revolution, which you may remember, which in turn was a cultural phenomenon following
in America.
In America, but also worldwide. It was
yes.
It was worldwide. And this was it was an interesting so-called revolution because the, I would say, the sense of unease that was pervading through society in the United States, being generated by the, primarily, but not only, by the Vietnam War, it had to be logically expected that the revolution would direct itself to improve the general conditions of mankind, the
Sure.
working class revolution, a class struggle. But instead, it diverted quite significantly from the assumed goals that the revolution would have had. Namely, it went into a direction, rather than class struggle, into some kind of glorification of individual freedom, meaning anarchy. And out of that, we can say that the changes that took place, particularly in the personal life of people, anarchy means I'm only looking after myself. I don't care about what's going around me. And that was the beginning of another beginning of the New World Order. So we had the philosophical beginning, which was I didn't mention now, but we would become too long to explain it, which was the cultural Marxism, so-called cultural Marxism, which was a school in terms, goes back to the Frankfurt School, but let's not go in that direction. Sure. So there was the philosophical, or the philosophical basis of the revolution. The revolution led to some kind of triumph of anarchy, and out of the triumph of anarchy, especially in Europe, came up a decade of terrorism, of actual European terrorism. You know, there were the Red Band, the anarchist band. There was quite a blood spilled, particularly in Italy, in France also.
That didn't take hold, the anarchy, huh?
The anarchy took hold in a different way, because the value. It's easier to see it, to judge what happened then by what we see happening today, both here and even more so in Europe. Europe is a mirror of the New World Order, because in the European Union, jumping one step ahead, the European Union was established formally in all intents in 2002, if I remember correctly, when they decided that no longer that the states could not any longer use their currencies, and they all would use the euro.
Brexit?
Brexit is England never changed, never abandoned their currency. They kept their currency.
Yes.
But all the others did. And I mention this because one of the aspects of the New World Order is the loss of nationality. The New World Order aims at one globalized world and a one globalized financial system run by essentially an oligarchy, as we see it today, and where everybody is an atom, every individual is an atom, as much divorced from his old nationality as he can, and he essentially is a consumer.
Can we identify the oligarchs or the super oligarchs? That's diversionary.
Yeah, there are some, but it's a complex. Any complex situation cannot, if you can say yes, the Soros is an oligarch, or all the Goldman Sachs is run by oligarchs. You could say yes, but it will be. However, the statement will be subject to criticism because, well, how can you say that two people make all this happen? No, they are two kingpins, but there are many others. All the people who spend billions in order to finance this or that, jump into America, just following your question, to finance the election of a president, those are the kingpins of the New World Order, because whoever is elected, they will do their bidding. So,
are you a Marxian?
No, and this is the I would say the danger, or rather not the danger, because it's not danger. This is a tendency when you, if you criticize a certain regime, it doesn't mean that you subscribe to the opposite. So we're in an age of turbo capitalism, but that doesn't mean that the alternative is Marxism. However, the turbo capitalism, which is a neologism, it's a new word, is significantly worse than the capitalism that was known, or I remember reading, or something that was in the 60s or after the war. So this is a new type of capitalism, which really extreme, so which is part of the New World Order, which doesn't mean that because it is bad, we should revert to the Soviet Union and Karl Marx. Although there are many good things that Karl Marx said, so it's not. And we cannot have time to go into discuss Karl Marx, but so we can judge history either by extremes, right, left, Marxism, capitalism, liberalism, whatnot, or we can try to identify a few points that may be symbolic or can be used as a reference to explain a larger problem or a larger system or a larger sequence of events as they are occurring today. When I was back, we started by saying the end of the 68 revolution was I would say the prelude a few years before to eventually the fall of the Berlin Wall, the fall of the Soviet Union, and gradually through Europe, then the formation of the European Union. Now, the globalization that we see now implies a direction that wants to eliminate the individual states, as it happens in Europe. As an aside, now in the European Senate, European Congress, people are not allowed to bring in their national flags. I don't know whether you have followed the last participation of the British to the European Union.
A little bit.
When they brought the flags, and they were reprimanded by whoever one of these women, that she cut the telephone. Excuse me, she cut the microphone of Nigel Farage because he had shown the British flag. So, but it's symbolic, but it's also true. In the ideal new world order, there will be no states, there will be no nationalities, there will be eventually even the languages will have to disappear, only one language left. So there is a combination of separate events that altogether combine coalesce to create the new world order. One, as I said, the European Union is an example of that, because most people really didn't want to have the European Union. It was imposed from above. And even when people rejected some of the treaties, I'm not going into details, but the Treaty of Lisbon and others, the system, let's call it the system, you ask who is behind it. It's the system managed to impose it. So
the system, that covers all.
Yeah, but it's better to call it the system than say it was Soros, or it was the Zionists, or it was somebody else. There are people who have written about it. For example, there is an author called, very few people know about it, called Koudeneuve-Kalergi. He was the son of the ambassador of the Japanese ambassador of the United States, or of England, I do not remember, of the United States. And he was financed in the late 20s, was given financed by a couple of bankers with the equivalent of 100 million today approximately, in order to start this project of the European Union. And he wrote a book in German called Praktischer Idealismus, Practical Idealism, in which he explains what the future of the world and the future of Europe would be. And this is what he said. The book has never been translated into English. And it's not the only book that's been translated into English. Anyway, what he says, there will be a world order in which there will be one nationality only, and I'm afraid to say it, in which there will be a super class which will be made up of Zionists that will control everyone else. Now, this book...
Are you an anti-Semite?
There you are. Okay.
Provocative question.
I was saying, okay. You can be against an ideology, and yet at the same time you do not want to have any harm done about the people who hold the ideology. So to me, the word anti-Semitism is misleading, because it implies that you want to hurt people who belong to the ideology. I do not want. I personally, when I look at if I look at the United States Congress, if I look at Trump or if I look at Hillary, I say, good God.
Watch your language. Family, Trump, don't mention that, never mind.
Okay. How could possibly people like that exist, But it doesn't mean that you want to hurt either Trump or Hillary or whoever else. So you are against the ideology, but not against the people. So the people who in different ways subscribe to the ideology. I'm saying what you can do about Trump, because things that unfortunately, the media, as we all know, is biased. So they only tell very distorted way 1/10 is what's happening, what is actually happening, what happens in Palestine, what happens in Venezuela are horrible things. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you want to hurt Trump or any other one.
The power of the media is just beyond description.
Because it also is monopolized by one group that we'll not mention anymore. So so the answer to your question, it was a natural question to say that, but to say, are you anti-Semitic? No, not at all. I'm completely against the ideology. We can see it in Palestine. We can see in other places too. But it doesn't mean that you want to hurt anyone who, for good or for bad, subscribe to that ideology. But anyway, you asked me the question. So going back to the Kalergi guy, he made this plan. And this Kalergi do not know, but every year there is a prize given, the Kalergi Prize. And 2 or 3 years ago was given to the current Pope, which should tell you something. Which is this is a phenomenon, the Kalergi Prize, the Kalergi book, because I mentioned the Pope, the dramatic changes that occurred in the Catholic Church are all evidence of what we can call, again, the New World Order, which was the subject of this evening conversation. So to tie back, the Kalergi plan was, we could say, the
How do you spell that, Kalergi?
Kalergy.
Okay.
Okay. And because I told you the book is not translated, there are other books that have not been prohibited. I have another one very important, because it's very important to put into perspective the influence of Zionism on the Western world and in Russia. Solzhenitsyn is a name familiar to everyone. Solzhenitsyn. Okay? Mm-hmm. So we cannot accuse him. He could not be accused of being a communist, because he actually went to the West to complain about the restrictions of thought. He wrote a 2-volume book called 200 Years Together. And that book has never been translated into English.
Why not?
And I'm sorry, but this is the truth, you see.
Yes.
Because there have been a very important sect that said, no, this book cannot be translated into English, and the Zionists. I have the book in French, and there's a little history about it, because I wanted to. It's 2 volumes. I have it at home. I tried to buy it from a French bookshop in Paris from here. I didn't go to there. Give me the books. Could you send me to the United States? No. So I replied back, I cannot send it to the United States. So it was. I got it through censorship. So I got it through England. It was a French book bought from Paris through England. But I mentioned this because it shows in my own my example cannot be generalized, but it's not the only one. It's not the only book that has not been translated. Is the fact that there is actual censorship, and it is important for the people, for those. You ask me who are those? We'll call them those the unmentionable. What was Hillary said, the deplorables. The deplorables who run the world. It's important that they contain the information so that people do not have it.
Why the censorship, and they couldn't publish Solzhenitsyn's work in English? Why is that?
Because he made it's a very interesting book. He made a very detailed analysis of the relationship in Russia between the Jews up to the current world, from the times of Catherine the Great to the end of the Soviet Union. And it explains in detail why there were difficulties, and why it created among the majority of the Jews, a great animosity against the Russian state. So that was the reason why. Why should I not read it? But Dostoevsky has a very interesting chapter on this in his book called The Diary of a Writer, which is a very thick book. There's a whole section when he was describing, the points that create friction between the sect and Russia when it was still an empire before they became communists. So we digress slightly, but the point I was making was the founder of the Soviet Union, of the European Union, was this particular Kalergi. But we're going back after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the establishment of the European Union, the goals of the ideological goals, it is the point from which we digressed. The ideological points are: one, the elimination of the state, of this individual states, the elimination. And in fact, they are even now they are essentially hopeless. A state implies having control on its own economy. But now, as you know, when you have a central bank in Europe that issues the money, and you cannot issue the money, of course, the country are essentially not been able to move. A nation without a currency is not a nation. What is that? It's a colony, or it's a protectorate, or whatever you want to call it. So
who is the management behind this kind of system and the machinations of the organization and the states and the non-states? And what's going on? The New World Order?
Okay, this is the New World Order. Well, it's interestingly, again, you ask me a question I cannot answer, because if I say it is a Soros, it is whatever these people that finance the Hillary or Trump, because they are the same. There are people finance both parties. There is no difference between the two parties, just for the sake of entertaining, if you can call it entertainment, of entertaining the people. But one of the characteristics of the New World Order, I follow your question because it leads me in a slightly different direction, which is as important as, is the essentially unification of the financialization of the world economy. As you know, the United States has essentially given away most of its manufacturing to other places, but it survives on what is called financial engineering. And in one of the articles that I wrote, that I sent you to look at,
yes,
I was making an example of what happened to Harry and David, the old company that still sells spares. But that would be an interesting example of what happens with the New World Order. We went through all these things happen on a day-to-day basis. Every day there's an examples of the New World Order, but we do not see it because when you live day by day doing your stuff, I do my stuff, you do yours, you don't have much time to look at the overall picture of how things are evolving.
This is an example of human competition. One human needs to be superior to another human. Social responsibility goes by the wayside in the New World Order.
To an extent, but fed by by another idea.
Okay.
That the result is that, but the fundamental idea is every person is a unit, lives for himself, and he has the right to buy as much as he can, and he should, depending how much money he has.
Where did that come from? Greed?
Greed has always existed, even at the time of the.
Then we should have a system that has some sort of a control over human greed.
That is where I do not.
I'm steering you.
I don't think there is a system that can cure this, but there are currents. There are currents that can be fostered or prohibited that can lead to results which may be positive or negative for everyone else. And
everyone else.
The New World Order, as it developed, has been a very negative results, because we digressed, but going back to the main subject, one of the elimination of the nation. The elimination of the national state is one, but at the other end of the national state, in the state, is the family. You start from the family. You have the city or the province, the state or the county, whatever you are. Eventually, you have the state, and the state is the culmination of all the families that comprise the nation. So the battle of the New World Order is against two fronts. From the one end, the state. We know that because in Europe they want to make they have already made the European Union. Thank God that England got out of it, and maybe others, I hope, but I don't know. On the other hand, the other enemy of the New World Order is the family itself, because the family itself is the core of the state. And since the goal of the New World Order is to create a world, a globe of individuals whose only right is to consume, and to consume as much as possible, depending on how much they earn, then any obstacle to this goal has to be fought. And how do you fight the family?
How do the European nations that are managing successfully in some sort of socialism, in Northern Europe for the most part, how do they feel about the New World Order?
I think I would disagree with the fact that they're managing socialism. No. Many of the rights that were fought successfully in the 20th century have been eliminated. They're trying to eliminate them as much as they can. Look at what happened in France with the Gilets jaunes, with the yellow jackets. So your assessment, how could they manage? They manage because they're trying. There is a constant battle to reduce the rights of the people. So
darn, I thought I had a point.
Well, I'm not saying things that I invent. It's just the fact. And the other way of reducing the population to the state of as I mentioned, of the Mr. Kalergi that I talked about before, is this tremendous importation of people from the so-called the third world. This is not spontaneous. It is organized. It is organized from various organizations, mostly NGOs, and it is the third one of the I mentioned the destruction of the nation state. On the other hand, the destruction of the family. Then we digress, but only on the same subject of the family. The growth of the LGBT movement. You should see what is happening. It's nothing. Again, it's the same thing about the anti-Semitism. Don't want to hurt any Zionists or any Jews. It's an ideology that is the issue. In the same sense, there's nothing wrong. If somebody wants to be a different sexual orientation, that's good for him. No problem. But we are, at least I saw it even in Europe when I was there last summer. There is a glorification of I'll call it pansexuality now, and this is against a tool against the family. The other thing which another point to be kept in mind, as you know, now in many places, I cannot be precise, but essentially uterus is for hire. Now you can put your internet, you want to have a child, I lend you your... That's a typical example of what it means, the eradication of the sense of the family. So we're talking about, just to wrap it up, just not go too many directions. Berlin Wall, preceded by the 1968 election, preceded by the ideology that was imposed or promoted by the culture of Marxism, fall of the Berlin Wall, fall of the Soviet Union, creation of the European Union, and an ongoing fight in order to eliminate the nations, to eliminate the differences, and to import from other countries millions and millions and millions of...
You're talking about the influence of China in the new world order.
I do not know enough to say. I do not know enough to say how much they had influence, but they certainly...
We're running out of time, and we're just getting started again, but I love it, you know. So take me where you want us to go. We've got about 5 minutes or so to say what you want to say to me or to the viewers.
Okay. I attempted in a very imprecise, coarse way to describe the phenomenon that have gotten us to where we are today.
We being America.
Well, the world.
Okay, yes.
Because America is still the empire trying to impose its dominion all over the world. We don't need to go into example because it's too clear. On the other side of the coin, there are still some people who are objecting to this, and the objection comes primarily from the availability of the social media, the internet. And this is why there is so much censorship. I don't know what you follow, but many people whom I know, very, very influential people, I know been censored from the internet because that's the same reason. That's the same reason why I lost the train of thought. They are censored because, as in the Soviet Union, it was important to, to shut out any opposition. So in the turbo new world order system, it is important to shut out all those who may have a chance to influence people.
Excuse me. Edit that out later on, okay? I can hear you through the wall.
Okay. No problem. So I've attempted through your question to establish, however roughly, however coarse, however imprecise, a line of thought that brings us from the beginning of the phenomenon to where we are today, which is rampant globalization, rampant turbo-capitalism, rampant empire of the financial system, and of course enormous inequality. Excuse me.
Well, whatever happened to the idea of love and being kind to fellow humans?
It's unreconcilable with the New World Order. It cannot be reconciled philosophically, ideologically, and practically.
Wow.
It's true.
But it feels good for certain of us.
You cannot turn the light off on souls just by saying this is a new order. It happens gradually. But particularly in Europe, you can see the evolution just happening day by day towards a new world order. Maybe they will rebel, but it's impossible to rebel because you need to have an organization. In fact, meaningfully, the Yellow Jackets in Paris, they realized that any revolution eventually will have a leader, and so you will have inequality. So up to this time, they go in there to be shot, and they blinded. They're very, very harsh, the French police. But at the moment, they decided not to have a leader because they would like to change the system.
It sounds like your analysis suggests that there will be no success for those who would have a new world order.
Oh no, they would. I don't know. At the moment, they have great success. They will succeed in. They will. I do not know how. We don't know about how much Russia will be able to resist, or how much will be able to comply, because there are strong pressures to comply as the United States goes to Venezuela, which is an example. Venezuela, everything which is said about Venezuela is wrong, is completely wrong, and yet that's what people believe. People believe that what the tale that the administration tells them, including imposing this buffoon called Juan Guaido. As I was saying, just before coming here, there was a case that there are Venezuelans in these countries in South America that have followed the line of the Trump administration, like Ecuador and Chile. They wanted to repatriate
You
the
leave
Venezuelan.
me so unsettled because the time is running out now, and we're just getting started, Jimmie, again.
Well, at least I know. I haven't. Your questions are right. By every question that you ask me, that points to a different direction. But at least I hope we have covered the main point that indicate the presence and the development and the future of a new world order.
So this time we examine the New World Order. It was something that we didn't do in the first show in this family.
Yeah.
So looks like it's time for us to say good night. So thanks for watching. And remember, KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, not Dr. Don's KFC. Oh, kind, friendly, and charitable. KFC, kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too, and you too, and you too.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you so much.